preparing to stream us to YouTube.
Whee!
I know. It always is such a good feeling, like when it like connects in. I'm like, okay, we're ready.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to today's Eat and Greet. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in 1,000 years, which is not true because I think I just saw you like a week ago, but I always love when we get to be live together. I love that you take time to spend time on this channel. So hopefully in this next hour-ish, we're going to give you something that is worth the time you took to show up, and I definitely think that we will do so because you guys, I found someone really awesome who's a Virgo rising also and loves Mercury. So, when I found Nissa, I was like, yes, this is going to be a good eat and greet. And we're going to spend this next hour meeting and greeting, but then also we're going to have a conversation about Mercury. And I just love your style of presenting. So welcome to the Cyber House.
Thank you so much. I'm truly honored. And I think this is the first time, I have my own YouTube channel, but to be live and kind of like, wow, there's audience here, there's feedback, right? And that is really exciting. I am a Virgo rising, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Ascendant, all in Virgo. And my midheaven is also in Gemini. So completely Mercury, North Node's right there as well.
Yeah, and we were laughing about that as we were like meeting before, that we're like, oh my gosh, we have so much Mercury, like, and similar placements at that, in our charts. And so this it's always lively.
Well, I think it's astrologically precise, right? We have conjunctions, we cross path, we create, we collaborate, right?
Absolutely.
And I think, I don't know. Well, because I love everything that comes with the significations of Mercury. And we talked a little bit about both of us as a Mercury, someone, with Mercury as the ruler of the chart, we have deep interest in linguistic, in communication, and, that exchange of the mind. And so, yeah, Mercury has been, I wasn't planning on it. I'm a consulting astrologer, but now I'm a lecturer as well. And all of my lectures is like, can you either talk about Mercury or goddesses? So that's kind of like, okay, So I'm so happy to be in the space with someone who is, so mercurial. And, I know a lot about history as well. As an astrologer, you are kind of by trade a biographer, a historian, a profiler, right? And then basically this alchemy of what is vernacular and verbal into the exchange of mind. And so, yeah, I'm always loving that aspect of the communication and the mind, because that is a very important part of relationship,
Absolutely. Yeah. When we're looking at anything that has to do with, well, in any of the practices, whether it be natal, synastry, mundane astrology, we're really looking to Mercury to see how the communication, how the export of information and transit is going, because it's really a lot of what moves us around. So it's very exciting. But so I've got to ask you, because you're new to the Cyber House, new to our little world over here.
Yeah.
So we want to get to know you a little bit. And so I ask like everybody, but how did you get started in astrology? What's your journey been?
So it's really, I think, I'm one of those people who's like, everything that I've been through has been astrology, Looking back, I didn't necessarily, it seems so random, the journey of my life, First of all, I was born in Indonesia. in Java, you know, in the ring of fire in the middle of the equator, really. And I grew up in a place where five religions were very imposed, and that is Muslim. It's actually the largest Muslim nation. And then you have Catholic, Christian, Hinduism, and Buddhism. And Indonesia, before it was colonized by the Dutch and the Japanese for a long time, it is a Hindu kingdom. So it's really interesting when I got into astrology later, fast forward, right? I'm also exploring Vedic astrology. And then I realized, oh my God, everything that is in Sanskrit is in my mother's tongue. Like it's that full circle, right? And that just, you know, being in Indonesia, and you know, I grew up in a culture, you know, in the eastern part of the world where, you know, they have an awareness that the veil is very thin, that we are not just in this simulation, it's bigger, there's an interconnectedness, there is, you know, like good forces, bad forces, and everything in between. And then so I grew up with a family who, you know, practices what I know now is Chinese lunar almanac. You know, this is not a good day to get a haircut. You know, this is a good day to plant seed and things like that. So that started very early on. I burn incense ever since I can remember. And then bam, suddenly my mom, you know, became a Christian, and we adapted this whole other, you know, lenses. And, you know, I think everyone who speaks English have that Western mind that comes with it as well, like that puritanical good versus evil, you know, what's the idea of God. And that shifted for me, you know. And then my journey took me, then my first migration, I lived in Paris, 2 blocks away from the Louvre, which I was too young really to comprehend, but at that same time I was still, you know, like Indonesian's my mother tongue, French is my second. But I'm still learning things. I didn't have a social life. But what Paris was, it was a living museum, right?
Sure.
So I would I would look at the statue, and then I would look at, oh, this one always comes with the wreath. Oh, there's always someone nearby with a spearhead. And like, you know, and then of course, and then I learned that I'm like, oh, Athena, oh, Hera, Juno, oh, Venus, you know. So when you're asking me my origin of astrology, it was art. You know, I have a bachelor in fine arts, and I dedicate my, you know, I'm like, wow, actually that was a fabulous education for anyone who wants to be an astrologer. When I went to, then after Paris, I came to San Francisco to go to art school. That's when I learned about Joseph Campbell and the mythology around the world and the whole idea of archetype. And then Steiner, and also, you know, I've been in Paris, so I'm familiar with like the masterpieces and the great artists. But then now I know how to interpret them, right?
Sure.
So like that's what I've been doing. I'm like, oh my God, before I interpret art, and now I interpret chart. It's just
funny though, because it's very mercurial. I mean, your whole
right.
journey is like multiple languages,
Mm-hmm.
multiple cultures, which multiple
Mm-hmm.
cultures are
Mm-hmm.
multiple languages as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then this idea that like no matter what was happening, you're always in the space of some kind of interpretation of symbol, of
Mm-hmm.
symbolism, of
Mm-hmm.
all of these,
Metaphors,
right? And
absolutely.
it's just like happened so naturally, so that it
Yeah.
sounds anyways like a transition to actual consulting astrology was like just around
Mm-hmm.
the corner.
Right. I think it's everything that I've been through. So because I've been, like looking at art and so easily profiling that significations, right?
Mhm.
The complexes. I'm like, oh, this is Madonna and a horror story. Oh, this is Pluto and Persephone. Oh, this is like, Icarus and, like
Right.
the mythology that I've learned all this time came alive
Yeah.
very much in my client work. I'm like, oh my God, this story has been around forever, right? And so that's why we talk, you asked me about the topic that I want to do. And Mercury, is just wants to be talked about right now.
I know, doesn't it? It's like it's so funny because we're having this talk today. I'm doing a
Mhm,
talk over the next 6 weeks in 6 different places about Mercury, and that is exactly what
mhm,
I said too. I was like,
mhm.
Mercury wants to be talked about this year. Like it's a year of
Yeah,
air.
right.
Mercury's like I've got
Mercury,
things. Yes.
retrograde in Gemini, and I believe we are also in the same summit again for the second time this
Yes.
year, hosted by Jamie Lee
Jamie,
Goldstein.
who is in the chat. Hi,
Oh,
Jamie.
hi, Jamie! So
Yep.
excited, and I will be. I'm excited to hear what you're going to be presenting for Jamie
Mercury wants
Summit.
to be talked about. Yeah. Oh, well, it's going to be, I think anytime Mercury
Mm-hmm.
comes to the table, I feel like for me, anyways, that I
Uh-huh.
don't have to think very hard about it because to me,
Mm-hmm.
my experience with Mercury is it just kind of drops the information like this is what I need to be talked about. This is what needs to be heard at this particular time. And so I
Mm-hmm.
like the intuitive creation of some of these talks.
And if I'm not wrong, you have Uranus Mercury opposition, right?
I do, yeah, midheaven
Yeah.
IC. And
Ooh,
so, yeah.
that's why I have Mercury square Uranus conjunct Mars. So again, I really like you. Yes, I prep, right? Like a Virgo. But at the same time, especially with someone who's also Mercurial, there is the moment will reveal itself, like I just have a basic outline here of the archaeology of Mercury. And we can just have this like organically, right? Like I'm such a lecturess now, you know? And one of the things that, of course, that I learned from art and also really explored in our astrology community is the Greco-Roman archetype, right? And this is Hermes, who is the youngest child of Zeus, who is a self-made god, and the story with Mercury, and I'm gonna go in depth, is that he stole a flock of heifer from Apollo, walk it backwards. So Mercury retrograde is definitely part of the story. A little sneak preview of my talk. And then at that in Greek religion, Mercury was actually the first god who divide things into 12, which in astrology, oh my god,
Important to us. Yeah.
12 houses, 12 zodiacs, 12, the 12, 12, 12. And that is actually when we are talking about a little bit about the history, I learned that back in the days, there's the people that is called Chaldean, who is also very mercurial flock, right? And they are the ones who back then divide things into 12 as a divination, and that is mercurial. Because back then, before the marriage of, the Egyptian and the Roman Empire, the Egyptian divide things into 10. That's why we have our decimal decades, right? Decans. This is all like the Egyptian concept. So it's really interesting to me, like this whole number of the division between Egypt 10 versus the more mercurial lineage of Chaldean. You know.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I think about, and actually Sasha and I are getting ready to do a talk about the days of the week and the planets that they're associated with and stuff. And Mercury, or Hermes, was said to have been born of the fourth day. So when we're looking at the calendar too, and we look at, just even the way the association of the fourth day being a mercurial day, it's like it's just kind of neat to see all of the divisions of 12 that become associated with this mercurial energy, right? So I always love seeing that symbolic nature.
I mean, that's the thing, right? The deeper you are in this, I think astrology is a wisdom science, There are signatures in all the things, right? And so, and part of doing research for this talk is, I want to bring other Mercury manifestation that is from around the world, For example, I'm gonna start right here.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. So this is just a little layout, right? We're gonna talk about Hermes Trismegistus later because that's come after Domani. But like one of the old one is the Egyptian Thoth, right? This is in Egyptian mythology, Thoth is always by the king's side.
Always.
Right? Yeah. Always. It's always kind of this trickster jester, but it's thought-provoking, right? And it's funny. That's why you want to have and I always think about how symbolic metaphor and in life, like the sun is the king and Mercury is never that
the king.
Exactly. And it's like what, max 27 degrees away, right? In someone's chart. So consequentially, it means that who you think you are, Mercury, and your spirit and your sun aspiration, if it's not co-presence in the same house, when it's a different house, it's a reaction. Anyway, that's like another topic. And
that's like a whole other talk, right?
Right. It's like, do you have Mercury co-presence with, in the same house or the other? Because I just feel like when it's in a separate house, right? Or even in a separate zodiac, even by, close by orb, there is a slight division in who you think you are.
Absolutely.
And what people perceive of you,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Combust, right? Like they're right there. It is, that is a whole other experience. And I feel like it is a space of clarity of, like you said, what we think we are.
Right. And I think it's really important because what we think we are, we manifest.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the story you tell yourself is the sun, you know, and who we think we are is Mercury. And it's kind of like, how do we work all of these forces so that they are in alignment, you know, even though sometimes it might be challenging by aspects or you know, and things like that. But I just love the idea that till today, you know, thousands of years, you always see a king and a jester nearby, you know, and that is like Mercury as Wednesday is next to Jupiter too, Zeus, you know. So all these side by side is just a beautiful schema to me, you know. And so yeah, I mean, I don't see what you're seeing on the YouTube, like what are people saying?
Yeah, people were they're just like chatting amongst themselves, and it's so funny. Jamie and Sasha are in here. Sasha's my assistant, and then we've other people talking about the Mercury timing that's going on right now, and people think that you're lovely, so that's very nice.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I do have to say, it's it's brave to do a Mercury retrograde summit on Mercury retrograde.
Sometimes I think they're the best, though. Like I don't know. Maybe it's because I like have like done, I don't know, a whole bunch of summits that happen to be at the retrograde that I'm like, yep, let's just get it done, because we're all like kind of vibrating backwards where there's time to think about what we're thinking about. You know, so I'm actually getting ready to like post the link in the chat section to the summit so people can come hear what else we have to say. But
that's awesome. Yeah.
I want to like not divert, but I want to point out something really cool about the way that you're presenting, and that's you're not using screen share. You are a hand drawing mercurial being to share your information, and I just think that that's so cool.
I tried, you know, like I tried with Canva and everything. Like I'm a Virgo stallion. I want things to be perfect. But in the end, you know, like what I use is kind of like when I'm laying out a talk, you know, like this is to me is the importance of mythology and what it's about, you know. And this is kind of like giving my brain, you know, like a place to, you know, then evolves. And I know about this. So each one of this is like a prompt to me, you know. And also, yeah, I cannot Canva this, right? Like, I mean, so I did some Canva, but at the same time, you know, I see things in epigraphs, in the, you know, in the logic of things. And this is another thing that I'm doing for my mystery school. I call this talk the 6 pomegranate deal. And it's a journey about Pluto, Persephone, and Demeter, and how it tells the story, how we have the 6 pomegranates when, you know, it's the agricultural thriving time. But when Persephone goes back with Pluto, the underworld, it's winter, it's fall, it's nothing is growing. And this is how the Greek back in the day, before they, you know, Hesiod as well as Homer jotting things down, this is like their nighttime stories, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I just love stories that have been alive for thousands of years. So, and
we have a question for you real quick.
Absolutely.
I know it's like in the middle of your talk, but if you feel like you can answer it. So in the chat, somebody's asking about, you know, the association of Gemini with like media and teenagers and how that's gonna work during this upcoming retrograde. What do you think about that?
Well, I think here's the thing, right? And I always like to bring things into not an isolated topic, but let's expand it to an axis, right? So
Sure.
first of all, Mercury is the planet that rules two signs, Gemini and Virgo. Upcoming Mercury retrograde is in Gemini, but Virgo will still be as affected, right? Now, let's explain a little bit about the process of Mercury and Gemini versus Mercury in the sign of Virgo. Mercury is how you process data. Now, in Gemini, in a mutable air sign, it processes data outwardly, in order, like, these are, the news, the media, they have to like even, like gossip is a very Mercury Gemini stuff, because you tell a story and sometimes your tongue is faster than your mind. And all of this is about assimilation of data, right? In its very essence. Now we're talking about Mercury in Virgo. Now, this is the invert outward, right? While Mercury in Gemini process things outward, cross-pollinating, right? Gathering data. And also that's very youth, right? In Gemini, it is like the third sequence.
Right.
While in Virgo, it's a little bit later. It's after the luminaries, after Cancer, after Leo comes then the Mercury ruled sign of Virgo. It talks about also processing data inwardly. Now, that makes a very good analyst, right? A
Mhm.
good alchemist. And on the other side of the spectrum, instead of the jester, the teenager, we have the hermit in the tarot. That is the sage, that is have been through digesting, right? And embodiment of that analysis. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think about it too, like, you know, teenagers and Mercury, one of the things that like it just immediately pops in my head is their little cliques, right? They're a bunch of little social networks in and of themselves without ever having to step online. And how much is happening inside of a teenager at that time? It's very mercurial. Our bodies are very mercurial by nature. They're a set of systems always having conversations, and so I think a lot about when, just being asked this idea of, Mercury and teenagers, I'm like, oh yeah, it's its own social dynamic within its social dynamic, kind of that fractal idea.
Right. And it's really interesting too, because we're talking about Gen Z, and for me, whenever I look at generations, I look at Neptune cycle, because I know, like some people look at, you can categorize into everything, but for me, Neptune, it's the cultural zeitgeist, it's the collective unconscious, it's what makes one person famous and things viral is Neptune, so for me as a nerd, like I'm like, okay, so another side project that I'm doing is like, it's really interesting. In every Neptune, every time Neptune change style, different style of music comes about, different fashion, it is very different from like the 80s padded shoulder and big hair to like Kate Moss and Calvin Klein, right? And then now Kim Kardashian. And like this is another topic that's like Neptune. But let's go back.
Whenever I have people over, we find like all of these additional topics where I'm like, oh, this is the nature, isn't it?
Right. I mean, and I mean, I can talk about astrology all day, which I know you do too, And right now, the thing that is absolutely driving me crazy is that, and please tell me if there's someone who specializes in out of sign conjunctions.
Oh, I don't know. I know that Rick
Mm-hmm.
Levine talks about them a
Okay.
fair amount, and I like them. I like and
Mm-hmm.
I count and I use out of sign conjunctions for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I just feel like, I mean, I study it by looking at people's chart, right? And my own out of sign conjunction. But I want someone with more data and more
Yeah.
research. So yeah, Stormy, anytime like, out of sign conjunction, please think of Nissa. I was like, hey, Nissa, don't miss out on this lecture. you know or maybe you should do it with Rick, and I would be an audience. And
You hear that, Rick? We've got a topic.
requested by a Mercurial.
That's
Um,
right.
So yeah, what else is going on in the chat?
That's it for right now. We're just kind of having a little
Mm-hmm.
chat, but people are loving your drawings. Just the fact that you've done it by hand is absolutely beautiful.
I mean, that's Mercury, right? Like hand lettering is I- it's it's one of the first thing we did as human, right? All these cave painting. There's an urge for us to like do a movement, and it's really interesting too because we're talking about Gemini, right? Limbs,
Mhm.
and in the Eastern culture, the art of calligraphy and sword is the same because
Okay.
it's doing the micro movement and in hand lettering. But
Mhm.
then you do it with the sword, but it's the same. And there's something that I feel just comes through
Sure.
when I drew this thing. Like, for example, this is one of the things that I did in recent, you know, for the AOA summit. It is
Mm.
the whole story of the Iliad and the Odyssey in glyphs, right?
Wow.
And I feel like, oh my goodness, like I don't know how to Canva that, you know?
Right. Well, and maybe
And
that's not your
then,
like
right.
mercurial process because I don't know about you,
Mm-hmm,
but I feel like this has been a
mm-hmm,
year for sure where the
mm-hmm,
elements or the avenues of my
mm-hmm,
Mercury that are still developing have
mm-hmm,
definitely started to come out. But I know the areas that I'm very comfortable. Like I'm
mm-hmm,
super mercurial, but I don't
mm-hmm.
like writing. And so of course I've signed on to write like
Uh-huh.
10,000 things this year,
Mm-hmm,
but it's very much so that side of like that arc of Mercury for me
mm-hmm.
developing because I don't innately believe that just because you have a placement you know how to fully activate it.
No, I think that's the journey, right? And then you look at the progression and then the perfection and like the transit, the people in your life, all of the above. And I think for me, like, to activate this concept of creating this for people to understand happens while I am in my bunker. You know, most of my friends are with children. I love them, but they're creating babies. But I'm writing a book. So that's another fifth house stuff, right?
Right, it's your baby, that's your baby.
That's my baby. And I do have to say, I'm having nodal return in Gemini,
Uh-huh.
my 10th house, yours too. That, oh my God, I've never been so busy, and now I really miss last year.
I know now, so somebody asked in the chat, what's your out of
Mhm.
sign conjunction?
My out of sign conjunction, it's my Jupiter at 3 degree Capricorn, conjunct 28-degree Neptune in Sag.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really fascinating because, it's also very close by my IC. And my Neptune, it's really funny. My Neptune is like connected to the galactic center,
Okay.
pretty tight orb, right? And then it's Jupiter and Neptune. It's like boundless. And I do really experience that, like astronomy, mythology. Like I'm just like a data hoarder, right? Like, and in terms of like, I've been European, I've been Asian, I'm American, I'm a global citizen, right? So that's very like Sagittarius and Jupiter, the travel international. So that is my out of sign conjunction. And yeah, I mean, I love Jupiter and Neptune together. I really do. I feel like even prior to my more awakening to bigger spirituality, I've always been a devout religious child. You know?
Sure.
it, it gave me framework. Now I have Sunday shenanigans on my channel, but back in the day I was like a youth Sunday school teacher. Like, but looking back, I am talking about the same thing. I'm talking about the 12 apostles,
Right,
right?
12. Always attracted to 12.
And then the fact that the Chaldeans, again, the Mercurial, the person who, the people, the 3 wise men who brought frankincense, spikenard, and myrrh. Oh, you don't think they're an astrologer? Identifying that like planetary conjunction that we call the Star of Bethlehem,
Yeah.
So now even that's kind of like blowing my mind, how I'm like all of the answers I look for is it's been answered by astrology and history.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So while because we've got just a little bit of time here, and I know there's people who are kind of shouting out their Mercury in the chat here.
Okay.
So I want to get your feedback on like, okay, at this point in the year where we are, like, what are your suggestions for people on how to really work with and own their mercurial energy, especially in high air? It's very stimulated for a lot of
for sure. My only thank God it trines Saturn. Right? Thank God it's trining Saturn. And you know how it's manifesting for me this year specifically. I was so grateful for Mercury retrograde when it was in Aqua. Like I felt the sequence of events of like the transition, of like that, vaccine rollout, December, and it was too fast, and then like it was Joe Biden, and then it was like I was so overwhelmed but excited, right? We're moving forward, but I figured that that retrograde gave me a time to slow and track. I'm like, what did I sign? What paper did how did I, so let's stop and revert back, revise, restructure, right? And right now, I gotta tell you, like, I am totally already retro shading.
Oh yeah, me too.
I'm like, I actually have a little booklet, a flip book that I actually already did for Mercury retrograde, like the cycle. I couldn't find it. Just like, where is it, But of course, I have like 8 boxes of writings that I need to sort through. So like you said, what is the tips right now, it is managing your expectation, right?
Especially in
So,
Gemini.
especially in Gemini, there's gonna be a lot of, I don't know, I always even see, the whole Megan versus the Queen, the like slander and like that whole thing.
Mhm.
Kind of really worried about Israel and Palestine at the moment, and they're not listening,
Right.
and that's a mercurial thing. And
It's
how.
nice in mundane astrology. I think that the
Mhm,
retrograde will be very helpful too, because Mercury in mundane astrology will pull us back to the table of negotiations, treaties,
mhm,
conversations,
mhm.
diplomacy, all of these things. I mean, I think we'll
Right.
see more diplomacy when Mercury retrogrades in Libra, but I do think that this
Mhm.
is, the trade and negotiation conversation globally, which does impact all of
Absolutely.
us, I think is going to have a large portion here at this retrograde.
I mean, and that's in the macrocosm,
Right.
but microcosm wise, I ha- I'm I am, like with everybody, this whole CDC thing is so retro shade. Take off your mask, put on your, it's like, what? You know? And I just filed my tax, and that was a very Mercury retrograde thing because I am backtracking things from 2020, almost reaccounting thing
Sure.
play by play, And I hated it, of course, but when I did it, I was like, wow, I learned a lot, you know?
Right. So we'll
Like,
see that. You think we'll see
right.
that for people? Like you kind
Hmm.
of get the opportunity to, if you use your retrograde well, go back over your details. And it's not
Hmm.
even details of the last like 4 months, 5 months. It may be a little bit bigger, just depending on what house it's happening in for you.
Hmm. Right. And with Saturn involved, like, even though it was annoying for me to like revisit my books, now I love it. Like, now I'm like, everything is in a new folder. I understand where everything is. Now, like, my office folders is like Virgo immaculate. And I get so much satisfaction. I have a mild obsession with office supplies, and I get to use them all.
So funny.
What about you? What do you have going on with
Yeah.
Mercury?
Well, since my Mercury is in Gemini and it lives in the 10th house, for me, it has definitely been a time where I am going back over
Mm,
work things. I'm answering emails. I'm
mhm.
getting back to projects that I started
Right.
because I too, being a Virgo rising, am very well prepared. And so I had
Hmm.
surgery. And so I've been gone. And my
Nice.
channel and my business, though, are
Hmm.
set up so that things are always worked in advance. So I mean, I could probably be
Hmm.
gone for the next year and nobody would know. You know what I mean? But
That's
it
amazing.
yeah,
That's
I'm real well
amazing.
prepared. I am prepared, I will tell you that. But so now though in the
Uh-huh.
retrograde of it, I'm getting to go back like physically because actually my
Hmm.
midheaven is 29 degrees Taurus. So sometimes
Ooh.
the Mercury
Right.
retrograde sometimes for me just turns into needing to do physical things, material things
Hmm.
and get them taken care of. But also in terms
Hmm.
of um next year and the next Kickstarter that we want to do to bring
Hmm.
intermediate level astrology and
Hmm.
teachers to the table. We're in planning for all of that right now, and we'll start doing teacher invitations and
Hmm.
things like that. So it's like the retrograde for me feels like a deep breath to be able to go back over the details of these things that
Yeah.
I'm away from and
Yeah.
get them sorted and get my
Right.
mind sorted on
Right.
what have I learned and how do I want that to look? So I think that that
Hmm.
is a great tip for people. Look at what house this Gemini retrograde is coming in
For sure.
for you and
Hmm.
go back over it. And specifically, when
Hmm.
Mercury moved into Gemini at the beginning of May, you can back right up to then. What were you working on for like 29 days before Mercury retrogrades and redo that? I mean, if you need to take it in a small bite, look at that. Just look at that, right?
Totally. And I think that's what we need right now, is small bite, one step at a time,
Yes.
And I think just like turning in my tax, I know it's not going to be perfect, and my accountant will give me some homeworks. Like, I already plan on it. I give myself margin, and yeah, I think the story that you tell yourself hopefully is not one of self-flagellation.
Right. More
You
of a,
know,
I'm learning and I can
and
do this.
and this is today, and this is where we're at today. I know you have more of a 10th house, so like you are so like I bow to that, and I know just after this I'm gonna go through all of my papers and refoldering, because it drove me nuts that I did not have that booklet that I already made, and there's no copy. But anyways, I was wondering if there's any other questions. We have like a little bit more time.
Yeah, so far not any other questions. People are just sharing about their placements right now too, which is why I mean sometimes, it's nice to just give a couple like experiences, like we've been sharing, but also like just thoughts on, what's coming up and where do we look at this going forward. And I'm a big fan this year of how do we assimilate our Mercury energies in everything that's going on, so a portion of that for me is considering, what's your Mercury element, because this is going to be a great guide for you, I think, this year, if you're paying attention to it. And you can also pay attention to, if you're interested, you can pay attention to your quality or your modality to see how do you temper and assimilate that Mercury, because how do you get your mind, how do you wrap your head around everything that's going on right now?
Well, I have some few tips on how to work with Mercury that I really gather from its stories, right? Mercury is a trickster god, and doesn't like to be called liar, but doesn't really fully tell the truth.
Sure.
Right? When we're talking about the realm of Mercury, we're talking also things that starts with MER, which is mercantile, right? Mercury, in mythology, even in different, we always have Mercury in different pantheon. For example, in the Orisha, Mercury is known as elegua, which is the same etymology as the word eloquence, right? Is to be able to communicate with finesse, with style, and that's sales. That's pitch, right? And this is why also Mercury rules traders, right? Short distance travel, and traders is what cross-pollinate. This is why we have pasta, and in China we have dumplings. Like this was a mercurial attribute, and in itself, it's something that catapult to pivot your life, right? That's the archetype. Like, Mercury has is at home in Gemini and Virgo, but in ancient astrology, the joy of Mercury is in the first house.
Right. Okay.
And the thing about the first house, and I'm not looking at it just like as a division, but if you look at it, Mercury in the joy of the first house, right? Like let's bring this up. So right here, and then Mercury in Virgo, this is what's really upholding the horizon, you
Sure.
know. And so for me, it's I always think that the one thing that is the most empowering and how we is the most function of Mercury is the story that you tell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether you tell yourself you can do it or not, you're right, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you level up with Mercury, right? And Mercury in Gemini, it's you level up with conversation.
Yeah, including the one you're having with yourself,
The most important one,
right?
because that indicates, then it's communicating with Venus, your self-value, right? And also um managing the relationship with others through communications. In the glyph, like Mercury is the one with the three objects, right? The half crescent, the moon that is in tune with the other, the eternal self that is the circle, and then you have the cross, which is the axis of time and space. And therefore, too, that's why it's in the fourth day of the 7 day cycle, because when you fold the seven, you find Mercury right there in the center, you know?
Mhm.
It really brings in that sun and moon together. And other things that I want to talk about that, you know, that that might widen the knowledge of Mercury, because the more you know about the mythology and its manifestation in history, the more I get it.
Right.
And, I think, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, which is allegedly written by Hermes Trismegistus during the 3rd AD, right? It comprises all the wisdom that is now our cute science is just starting to prove something that's been written for thousands of years,
Right.
right? You know, I think lineage is due. We reference science, but I think, what has been with us for so long and present still is something to be honored and sacred,
Mhm.
And what's really interesting too, and not a lot of people really know about it, but the archetype of the pantheon of Mercury in the Eastern cosmology is Buddha,
Mm. Makes sense.
right?
I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
It's all about the mastering of one's mind, right? It is living on the as royal and as a monk. And Buddha also existed in a couple of religion, you know, as a pantheon in Hinduism, and as a focus of inspiration, soul inspiration in Buddhism. And that is, again, if you're having trouble with Mercury retrograde in Gemini, maybe read Siddhartha,
Oh, love that.
maybe connect with meditation, like all these the gems. I'm not a religious person, but I always take in what's best of the ritual and the sacred ceremony to
Absolutely.
really honor it. And if you're not into really the Eastern cosmology, then you can also talk about the Norse mythology, where we have the story of Loki, which is right now it's actually a TV series.
I know. And I'm such a big fan of Thor and Loki. And it's like,
right.
Oh my God, my girls always laugh because my husband's this like big blonde Scandinavian guy. And they're like, Mom, you married Thor. I'm like, it's true. And he probably got his Loki, you know?
Right. And Odin. And I think this is what's really fun, right? We're both such astrology nerds, is that, oh wow, you know, in this time, you know, you have a manual, we have given the pragmatic tips, but at the same time, you know, reread that story, get inspired how they transform and pivot things
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
their style, in Norse, in Eastern philosophy, in Egyptian, in Chaldean, in the story of the Bible. That's my jam, is to find signature of this one archetype in everything.
Absolutely. And I think that's beautiful because, you
Mhm.
know, I know we're just about out of time, but it's like right
Mhm.
now in a heavy air year, I think exploring our ideas, exploring the information around us is just such a gift. We've got, you know,
Mhm.
quite some time to be doing this. And with Mercury and the retrogrades this year, we're moved into air and we're out of the water retrograde. So really going back to our history, going back through our own minds is something that's very available to us to kind of catch up and get current with our own lives and our own thinking and the things that will set foundations for our minds going forward.
And I think, you know, just the fact that you just mentioned retrograde, something that, you know, water, air is like, it's all about integrating your emotions and your thoughts, right? And
Mhm.
there's a reason why it retrogrades. Sometimes one move faster than the other. And I see it as a time and an allocation of maybe it's time to integrate those two,
Yeah, absolutely.
you
Emotional
know?
intelligence, full force.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well,
Well,
Nisa, thank you.
Stormy, that was so fun. I
I
mean,
know, and we could probably talk about
eh,
anything for like
right.
5 hours.
I mean, I'm gonna watch this. I'm like, oh my god, yeah. There's like 5 other subjects, like auto sign conjunctions. This and you know, like that. You know, totally. And anytime, you know, you're such a joy. You're a great conversationalist. I love our energy together. And thank you so much for inviting me to your platform. And yeah, thank you. And I'll see you on Instagram where I hang out. And thank you for
Yeah,
tagging me.
absolutely. Yeah. And tell people really quickly. I mean, we're going to put it in the
Uh-huh.
description box down below, but tell people your website. Where can they find you?
So most of the time it's really interesting. People don't even go to my website anymore because I hang out on Instagram. And my handle is at Via, that is Venus IA underscore, and then my first name Nissa NISSA underscore. And I upload my videos there. You know, this conversation, I linked it to the link tree. That's where I put my musings, my writings, and my whole astrology catalog is on my Instagram. So yeah, thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
I look forward for your summit. What are you gonna talk about?
I am
And
going to talk about
mhm,
Mercury retrograde, the upcoming one that we'll be experiencing since we're going to summit in May here. But I'm
yeah.
also going to talk about
Mhm,
assimilating it with your Mercurial element
mhm.
and your Mercurial year. So
Mm,
we come into Mercurial
mhm,
times of our lives as well. So
mhm.
I am going to explore that, and I look forward to seeing you guys. And if you watch back through the chat, you guys, or you look under this video, we will also put a link to the summit if you want to grab a spot. So hopefully
Mhm.
you'll join us because it is going to be a great conversation in Mercury retrograde. So I hope to see everybody there.
I
And
look forward to it. Yeah.
yeah. And I hope you guys in this last hour, you heard something that made it worth your time you took to show up. I think that it was, even if it gave you just a couple things to think about as we're heading into Mercury retrograde and your own personal retrograde as well. So I will see you guys next time. And remember, tomorrow you've got another class in the YouTube Academy. So if you are behind or you're just raring and ready to go, you can always click the YouTube Academy playlist and watch all of the classes that we've had so far. We've been building from the ground up, nice and slow, and we've had some breaks in between too, so that you can absorb that information. So whether you're new or you've been studying 1,000 years, people are bringing beautiful content. And tomorrow we're going to go over Sun Moon blends with Catherine Goshen. So watch for your video coming out 11 o'clock Mountain Daylight Time every Monday and Thursday. So we will see you guys tomorrow. Bye,
Always love your content.